Hello and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we're doing a bit of a dramedy. We watched Force Majeure and the American remake Downhill. Jess, have you seen of or heard of these movies before this week?
I had not. So first I want to say thank you to whoever responded to our question that we asked on our Instagram. We've been kind of polling listeners and stuff. So if you're not on there, we're going to be periodically asking people for recommendations or things like that. So this was the first one that we got, and it was actually recommended by 2 people. But yeah, I had not seen them. I had not heard of them at all. And I'm not like the biggest Will Ferrell fan. So I was like, okay, but he's not like typical Will Ferrell in this. So I found it a lot more palatable than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, same. So Eric and I have seen the remake. I don't think we knew it was a remake. I think it was we just thought it was like a new like sort of dramedy. We both really like one of the directors and the screenwriter, Jim Rash from Community and other stuff. And I mean, granted, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is an absolute star, as I'm sure I've said on this podcast before. So yeah, she was like the biggest draw for us to go see it. And I remember really liking it. I think this was definitely one of the movies that we saw right before the pandemic hit.
Really? So you saw this in theaters?
We saw this in theaters, I think either December of 2019 or January of 2020, somewhere in there.
So you were one of the $9 million worth of people that went to see it.
That sucks. Yeah, we were.
Well, it was like a Searchlight production. It was like taken from Sundance and like made its way. It was the first title that Disney, or that because like Fox was bought out by Disney and then they rebranded as Searchlight Pictures or Searchlight Productions. So it's the first film that was released under that name.
Oh wow! Congrats! Good job, Downhill. Way to go, Jim Rash.
OMG.
But yeah, that's my history with it. Apart from that, I upon knowing that it was a remake, similar to like what we did with Let the Right One In and Let Me In, it's very similar where it's like kind of a remake or an international retelling of an international story from an American perspective, like several years later. There's not even like much hype around it. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, let's do that story, but let's do the American version.
I feel like there was more hype around Let the Right One In or Let Me In. Sorry,
because that was more cultish.
Yeah, and that one also happened, I think, a bit quicker too. It was like just
that was like
where this one was
turnaround.
Like, yeah, and this one was like a 6-year turnaround, like from 2014 to 2020.
That's true. Yeah,
but I think I'm interested to talk about because it is essentially the same story, but the ways that they changed it, okay, let me just.
I know. I have a lot to say about that too.
I have a lot to say about it, and like. Right off the bat, you know that you're getting like kind of a watered down version of it because the story is already 30, like the original is 2 hours long and the remake is an hour and a half. Like it's a smooth 88 minutes. So like, okay, cool. But what? Like, what are we doing? And was my thinking during some of this, I'm like, the first one, and we're going to get into it in a second, but the first one feels so intentional and it's so incredible in the way that it lets this experience happen with like these big giant long shots, and then it perfectly illustrates how these characters are feeling and the tension in that with another, like with a shot after that. And it was even more jarring going to the new one because it was so quick and there was no, it felt like it was just telling you what it wanted you to know. There really wasn't a lot of nuance there. So I'm excited to get into this.
The biggest difference is same. Oh my God, same. Because the biggest difference is the tonal shift. Exactly what you said. The first one, it is a drama character study about a failing marriage and a shitty husband, whereas the remake is like this kind of low-key slapstick drama comedy about this guy who wants more in his life, and you're like, what?
And this first one is like really not even just like a character study, but like a gender study on masculinity.
Yes.
And it is so
Oh my
poignant
God.
in the way that
Yes.
they do that. So it's so incredible to me. Like I'm so, what a treat to watch that movie. And then
It's great.
seeing the remake and how they pulled some of that back. And should we just get into it?
Let's
Jesus.
do it. I'm honestly
Okay,
so ready to talk
let's
about
do
this.
I'm
And my
so
brain is
pumped.
already going.
Ebba, Thomas, and their 2 children are vacationing in the French Alps, enjoying some skiing and much-needed time away from work. Unfortunately, things quickly take a turn for the worst when an avalanche crashes into the outdoor restaurant while they are waiting to order their food. During the commotion, Ebba stays with her children and tries to protect them, while Thomas grabs his cell phone and runs away without considering his family's safety. Luckily, the restaurant was only covered in avalanche smoke, quote unquote, and everyone is okay. Though the moment passes quickly, the terrifying experience looms over the family's vacation for the rest of the trip as Ebba and Thomas find themselves at an impasse, with Ebba insisting Thomas left their children and her to save himself, and Thomas adamant that he did not leave them.
The friction between Tomas and Ebba becomes more prominent as Ebba continually brings the event up in social situations, recounting the events, searching for someone to validate her experience, while Tomas continues to deny the truth of the events even after being presented with video evidence. Ebba and Tomas take time away from each other and their children to clear their heads. Ebba goes to Charlotte, the polyamorous hotel guest, to try and rationalize her life's choices by putting down Charlotte's. Meanwhile, Tomas goes skiing with his friend Mats, screams at the top of a mountain, gets drunk, and tries to prove his manhood at a real sausage fest. Eventually, Tomas confesses all his sins and breaks down hard. The kids see this and force Ebba to comfort him. In the end, nothing has changed and everything stays the same.
Okay,
I mean,
this is a fucking incredible movie.
It really is.
Before we really get into it, I want to talk about so the original title for this was originally supposed to be like Tourist, like with a U, and they changed it to Force Majeure. Which the definition is, according to Wikipedia, thank you, a common clause in contracts which essentially frees both parties from liability or obligation when an extraordinary event or circumstance beyond the control of the parties or sudden legal changes prevents one or both parties from fulfilling their obligation under contract. So that's so incredible and so perfect for this whole film. What a
because
title.
the whole thing, I mean, granted, first and foremost, a great film. It's really good. Like, I mean, the characters are so real and intense, and I mean, all of the it's just such a study and such an intentional movie.
The music cues, the color grading, the scenes. Like, something that I think American cinema does too much is they just cut away from a scene rather than letting it play out and letting you sit there in the moment, and really like getting everybody's reaction, or like it's such a good way to like build tension too. The opening scene, right? They're taking family photos. You can see how performative they're being. You can see that while Ebba loves her children, there's some tension there with her and her husband, but like you get this real sense of like performativity and like that they're just kind of doing what they're told or what society is telling them to do, right?
Oh yeah.
Which immediately like sets the tone for the rest of the film and like what happens in the climax. But then also like with the closing scene too, right? We have the bus driver is like awful. Ebba is scared. The Beardo guy like doesn't panic, and Charlotte stays on the train. But like, it's so like each character and how they respond to this whole event that's happening. Like Charlotte, who is incredible, and we'll get into, and I love her, and I have so much to say. She is really the only one that's free from all of these societal expectations, right? And she's just kind of like, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to do me. And nothing is going to stop me from going forward and being where I want to be and doing what I need to do. And everybody else that is chained down by this, like, by these societal structures and by their attachments to people that are shitty, not shitty, whatever, they all get off the bus and they're all like sad and have to literally walk down a fucking mountain with no jackets, with no luggage, with nothing. I mean, how great is that? Like,
it's a great ending.
After the journey that we go on with this film.
Well, because it is such like you said in the introduction, and nothing has changed. because it's really a film about studying this predicament of expectation within these very rigid and very structured gender roles. Also parental figures and what it means to be a caretaker versus what it means to be a partner versus what it means to be a friend. Like, you have these specific avenues, especially for this main character, Tomas, because it is kind of a study of like masculinity in the face of adversity. And our main surrogate for this is Ebba. She's like, am I crazy? What the fuck? Like, we're with her because we saw it too, but we're studying him and his reaction and how he's processing and what happened versus what's expected of him and how that's at odds. The ending's perfect. For these reasons, it's like the perfect ending. Again, she's like, I don't even care. My life's going to happen. I'm staying on the bus. Everyone else is walking down the hill, structured together in this expectation of like, yeah, we should have gotten off that bus, and nothing is different except now Tomas smokes. And
yeah, and
which
like,
is also,
he's not trying to hide his
he's not performing any longer.
Supposedly,
Which
we'll
I mean,
see.
he is such a coward. So to me, that feels that in and of itself, I think, is supposed to represent this level of like letting go. But in the end, that by itself looked so performative. Like, fuck it, I'm a man, I'm gonna smoke. Like, shut up. You're so tiring.
He's awful.
He's terrible.
Tomas is just like constantly, like, we watch him gaslight his wife just to her face in front of their children, in every social situation, to where like Ebba just wants validation that what happened, that they experienced the same event, and he is like, he's trying to protect his masculinity and his ideal of himself, so much so that he's willing to cause a scene and to be an asshole. So it pushes her to really just be like, no, you need to wake up. Like, here we are. This is what happened. And the conversations that they have with Charlotte and then with Matt's and Fanny, the friend and his 20-year-old girlfriend, incredible. Those
it's
scenes
so good.
And how it's not just like, oh, well, this is awkward, cut to the next thing. Like, no, they're trying to talk about this and they're trying to rationalize it. And we see Fanny like let go of her dude's hand. The second that he starts making excuses for Tomas, right? She lets go of his hand. She's like, nope. And she starts comforting, she starts being there for Ebba. And like
a stranger.
A stranger. She's like, no, I'm 20 years old. I'm here with this 40-year-old man. You don't know what's happening. And God, Fanny is great. And the women are written so well in this.
Yeah.
But like,
I mean, arguably the men too, because that's like,
absolutely.
It's so like, yeah, of course this guy would be like, well, you don't know what you would do in the, like, shut the fuck up. Like, so why are you coming to this man's aid?
Let's paint the scene for this, for everybody. I realize that a lot of you probably haven't seen this. So,
and sometimes we go in with zero context and just get deep into something. We're like, wait, what?
So in this scene in particular, after the avalanche, Ebba and Tomas are hosting Mats and Fanny, who I think Mats is just one of Tomas's friends that just so happened to be in the same area. So they're kind of like hosting them in their hotel room. And Ebba, who is still like, what a great performance from this actor. Like, in every scene, you can tell how uncomfortable she is, and you can tell how much tension she is carrying, and how hard this whole experience is for her. So it's never a question, right? And so the husband is just trying to act like this entire time after the avalanche, like wherever they're at, trying to act like, oh, everything's fine. I'm going to order food now because, see, I told you everything was fine. And for her to live through that and to have like the person that she cares about and loves and is raising children with to deny what happened and to like not even acknowledge her experience, like, or the experience of her children, right? She is just devastated, and she is fucking infuriated because he's choosing his ego over, like, you know, because all he had to do was just apologize this whole time, apologize and be like, yeah, I don't know why that happened, but he's like sticking to this rigid ass idea that, no, I'm a man, I'm not gonna do that, right? So they're at this like little dinner party, and Ebba just starts talking about it in the middle of one of Fanny's stories. She's like, hey, we need to talk about this. Boom, brings it up. And Tomas starts being like, no, I didn't run. Look, you can't run in ski boots, okay? Like, just giving like the fucking lamest excuses that anybody could ever give in this scenario. Then Mats comes to Tomas's, like, he's like, oh, I got your back. Yeah, I mean, like, it's fine. He says he believes that the enemy is the idea of heroes. And he then goes on to make excuses for survivors that like do terrible things, like, and sacrifice others to survive. He's like, yeah, no, that's totally normal. Those are the people that live. Like, I mean, it's fine, right?
Yeah, it's a messy, toxic male thing to do. I think like the way they capture this argument is so perfect because the moment he says, "Can you run in ski boots? Can you run in ski boots? Can you run in ski boots?" It is picture perfect of somebody backed into a corner who does not want to admit the wrong, because that's besides the point. The ski boots running in ski boots, that has nothing to do with the situation. It's a misdirect to try to get the spotlight off of them. And the way she brings this up just straight up in this conversation, I'm obsessed with, because also this is like the second time we've seen in mixed company her try to bring this up and her being gaslit. The first was with Charlotte and that man who she's sleeping with, the random man she meets. And they're at dinner, and that specifically too, where they start talking in Swedish together, just like hush hush, like, I know what I saw. No, you didn't. You're crazy. No, you ran away. No, I didn't. I didn't run away. This whole thing. And then it brings it up again. And I think it's like seeing that first before this scene just as like a heightening of tension. Like, granted, I have a lot to say about the cinematography in that scene too, because the way everything's framed, and then the moment after they're done speaking in Swedish, the tension cut is like a happy birthday song going on in the background.
Yeah.
But you see in the reflection this huge sparkly candle that the reflection ends up landing directly behind his head as a way to signify like the attention's on him. It's still tense. Like he's in the hot seat. It's very like intentional and cool. And you're like, fuck, that's amazing. But at the end of the conversation, he kind of just gets off scot-free. He's like, well, it's a difference of opinion. I saw it differently. Can we talk about something else? And she's like, okay.
And he tries to say like that your perception is different than my perception. I can accept your version of events. Why can't you accept my version of events?
Which is so toxic. Like,
so fucking toxic.
It's so messy.
So
toxic.
So
then seeing them come into this conversation where she's already been put down, she's already been stewing and festering in this. He's literally just pretending like nothing's happened. He's trying his best to perform that and perform ignorance. And she is fucked up. And rightfully so. Like she's wrecked. This is destroying her time. Every moment she's thinking about this. So in that conversation, the moment she interrupts the story, it's just like, I'm talking about this now. I'm like, yes, here we go. Oh my God, you deserve this. To the point where like, when she finally is like, it's on video. I have it on video. You're recording, right? Let's get the camera. And he's like, she's like, will we all watch? Are we good? Are we going to all watch this? Let's go.
Yes. Like she has to put him in the hot seat, and not just with her there, but with one of his good friends there. Right.
Yes.
Because otherwise he's just going to shrug it off or whatever. So this is her way of trying to also hold him accountable. But Mats instead just like internalizes this whole thing and starts like being like, well, I'm a man, right? And then he just goes down this also like parallel path with Fanny. Yeah, it's just real gross.
It's so good. And even after like the video proof that like you did, this story is exactly what she's saying and your version of it does not exist. Even in the face of that, this is where it gets interesting. I mean, more interesting for me as a study and as a conversation around heroic masculinity and like masculinity itself and how men project what it is that they think that they are when in fact they perform otherwise or exist otherwise. Even in that moment, he cannot believe it. He's seeing it and he's like, it's not that he can't believe it. He knows it's real, but he cannot let the guard down of performance of illusion. He can't. He's so structured. And even then he's like sad and he goes and like leaves with the kid and they're all talking out there and Mats is still trying to convince Ebba that like, oh, you don't know what you would have done in this situation. Like sometimes survival instinct just kicks in and like you just got to go and you can't judge him because you don't know what you would have done. And even in that time, he's just like, he cannot revel in it. He can't sit with it. And like, because then after that, the next day she's like, I'm going to go ski by myself. And he's like, oh, okay.
Just like
Are you sure?
it's
And she's
another
obviously
day.
like, what the fuck? And he's just like, it seems like he's pretending again. He's just like performing this. And then it's just, what an interesting and like cool discussion. Because like even after that, these moments where when he has his big fucking breakdown in the hallway where
Oh
he
my
just
God.
like weeps. And it's just, it is this like, it makes me so mad because it is this like childish helplessness of like weeping where it's like, yeah, sure, I'm glad you recognize like what happened, but now you're making this her problem in the same way that you've made this entire thing her problem, and now she has to like, you are rebuking ownership at every turn. Like you can't own you can't own your grief, you can't own your actions, you can't own anything. Everything has to be at the expense and labor of your wife. You are such a bad partner. And to further that, because to me that's the whole thing. It's like he's a bad partner, and this movie tells
Yeah.
us he's a bad partner at every fucking turn. Like at the beginning when we're setting that tone with the ambiance and everything, there's a scene where they're on like a conveyor belt, and this is supposed to be a trip that we've established that like he works too much, they're here because he works too much, and it's for them to like reconnect. He's not supposed to be on his phone, even though he's on his phone all the time working still. And she's like, hey, remember why we're here? He's like, yeah, sorry. Oof. And he's also a bad dad. The kids don't like him. The kids don't know him.
Oh, yeah.
Really, right? Like they just don't know who he is. So
And he's
trying
annoyed
to like,
by them. Like he
he's-
laughs at them for having feelings. Like, oh, they kicked me out of
Yeah.
the room. They kicked them out of the room because they're upset with their parents because they don't feel safe after that avalanche, right? Because
Literally,
daddy
yeah.
made them not feel safe. And like, and the kids know that he left them too, you know? And so they're in like this weird area, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care about them, and he doesn't care about the mom. He's just nothing but dismissive about them. And in that moment where he's breaking down, the most toxic thing about that is like he breaks down and he's just like absolutely devastated. He's crying, but like it's a performative cry, right? It feels
oh, it's so, yeah.
It is one of those ugly cries that you're ugly crying because you feel sad and ashamed at yourself. And he admits that he was scared. And then in addition to that, he admits that he cheats on her and he's unfaithful and he lies a bunch. And so everything comes flooding out, right? And then his excuse is he says, I'm a victim too, a victim of my instincts.
Oh
So
my
she's supposed to
God.
feel bad for him in this moment where he is a helpless little fucking baby on the floor, like, because, like, oh, he finally admitted all of this stuff. And can she stay mad at him? Can she do that? Can she have her feelings? No, because the children come in and the children see their daddy crying with no context and no understanding of what's happening. And they just try to comfort him. And he's like, oh, yay, thank you, comfort me. And then they scream at their mother to come and hug daddy, to comfort daddy, to be here for daddy, right? Reinforcing that like the family unit and the way that that exists is just continuing to allow like a pass for toxic masculinity and like encouraging and enabling this behavior. So she can't even be pissed in this moment or have questions or do anything. She has to be there for him because the kids decide like, no, you have to do this. You can't. And then you see daddy like put love all of these arms around him and feel so free. Oh my gosh. Right. And
Yeah.
I fucking hated that.
It's gross and it sucks, but I think it's so interesting from a story perspective. Like,
Yeah, no.
it's just like fucking, of course.
Great
Of
beat.
course. It's a
Great
great
beat.
beat. Like, good. Of course that happens. Fuck, that sucks. Fuck, he's getting away with it again. He's doing it again. Here he is. Congratulations. Like, what a loser. What a
This-
sad man.
This film is incredibly well written. Like,
Oh, yeah.
even though I'm like, oh, fuck that. Like, no, like this story is so well. There was not a critique that I had for this. There was not like, oh, well, this might have been better. It was just like start to finish, just
really
the
good.
beats, the characterization,
It's-
everything.
It's like it's a well written story and well acted. It's almost like a really good play. Like just this like so it's just everything about it's good. Like, I mean, a lot of the notes that I have too are like, You talked about tone setting at the beginning. The metal wiring as they head up the hill, as they're being pulled up by the handle, how that sounds and how it's a little bit jarring as they hit each totem or hit each pivot. The phone buzzing while they nap quietly, trying to invade and distract them from their unity as a family, and how that's his fault, that's his phone. And then like all of the toothbrushes whirring hella fucking loud while they're brushing their teeth as this like unspoken hum of sewage, like emotional sewage underneath that everyone can hear but nobody wants to acknowledge. Like amazing.
The cannons in the background.
The cannons in the background literally exploding. Like there are so many of these tone set shots with no dialogue where it's like, this is like, I mean, it sounds silly. This is art. This is like so good because it's everything is some kind of like artistic visual metaphor for exactly the study we're witnessing, exactly what we're going through. It's like fucking cool. And what I was going to say before, like the thing that throws it back to the beginning, where you see that like his kids don't really like him or know him and he doesn't really know them. They're on that conveyor belt and like the son throws his mitten off and he's like, what are you doing? Stop. And he tries to reach. He's like, hey, babe, can you grab that? And continues. And then you see her struggle off the conveyor belt, almost fall in her skis to try to get this thing as this sort of like a visual allegory for her being the one to pick up all the pieces no matter what. Like this whole thing is happening because of his relationship with his son. But it's like, hey, can you help? Can you fix that? Can you do that? Like, I can't do that now because I'm obviously busy, but it's like the first time he's seen his son in however long, but you need to fix it now. Can you do that? And it's like that setup is like, yes, that's what we're going to see. That's what this movie is about.
This movie was just so great at visualizing feelings and interpersonal communication, like, and at conveying that through what I guess most American audiences would see as just like a throwaway scene, which like really tells everything. You know, like that scene, like the scene where they are pissed after the avalanche and they run in the house and everybody like throws their skis down. Dad has to go and try to pick it up and he's trying to pick up all of these pieces while like nothing, and they just keep falling and they keep moving over here, and then he just like kind of gives up and he's like, whatever, I'm just gonna walk away. But like that's all like just this one continuous shot, right? And it's all like, and that's something that, like, I feel really adds to the mood of this because you get to sit in these moments. And I feel like the way that that creates tension and the way that it drives the story forward and the way that it's just so monotonous, but also so telling, like, it perfectly ties back to the thesis. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, I could not agree more. Every one of those is so good. Like, I'll give you two more examples. When she goes, like, I have so many examples of this. I'm obsessed with them because it's so well done. She goes skiing alone. This is after everything. She's still thinking about it all. She's on the chair. The chair is stopped. She's hanging there in the silence of the snow. Nothing's happening. It's just her on the chair, as we see. Slowly, you hear the chair start moving, and then a chair in the background passes going the other way slowly, and then another one a little bit faster, and another one a little bit faster as it's gaining momentum, as if these thoughts, and you see her kind of reacting like she's sitting in this stillness, and then it's like a thought, and another 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 thought, and the momentum just builds, and you see her kind of getting anxious as this is happening, and it's like, it's brilliant. It's fucking
so
brilliant.
Good.
And then in the same situation where she's on that chair, she decides to pull the bar down to like keep everyone on it. But then you see that there's two other people on it and the bar ends up hitting one of them in the head. And they're like, what the fuck? And she was so in her thoughts with this other thing. This is also interesting because it's like, even though in this moment she's so lost in this like being taken advantage of and being shitty based on this other person's actions, even if he doesn't realize that it's affecting other people, even in that moment, her lack of cognizance does a smaller version the same thing. She's not realizing that her action of pulling the bar down is affecting these people. And so the dissonance of her being somebody who's receiving something like that and also being the one to initiate and cause that, it's this weird moment of like dissonance where she can't really recognize it, and she looks at them and they're like, hey, what the fuck? Like, can you not do that? And she's like, doesn't say anything, kind of looks away. And they're like, excuse me? And she's like, doesn't say anything. And it's this really awkward moment where it's like, oh, she is also capable of this. This is like a human thing. Not as a way to excuse his behavior, but it's
Right.
a really interesting way to at least broach the topic of like the possibility that we all carry a similar behavior within us, that our actions, whether cognizant or otherwise, can and do affect those around us, both positively and negatively. Even if we can't see it, it's still happening no matter what, all the time, always. And it's like, that is sick. That's so
And
cool.
also, like, how harm is cyclical, right? Like, how, or
Harm
like,
is
and
cyclical.
infectious too, right?
Yeah.
Like, her husband is an asshole to her, which causes her to overthink things and not think about other people, which then harms other people, which then,
Yeah.
like, it's this chain and this never-ending cycle. And
Yeah.
and that's all in this film being perpetuated by toxic masculinity.
Yes. And I don't want to like equate, granted, like her emotionally abusive and shitty relationship with a singular moment where a bar taps somebody on a helmeted head. Like they're very different. They're very different. But
Sure.
in a narrative, it's very clear that this is happening for a reason, and that's the connect. I want to pivot to Charlotte because I feel like
Yes.
she is perfect as the one outlier in the system, like you were saying, the system of expectation, the system of like cis hetero parenthood, this system of like capitalism and work and fronts and performance and performative, like performative heroism and goodness. Like she's the one person who's like, that fuck that, that's fake. I'm happy, and if my husband's happy, I love that. And if my kids are happy, great. They're people, they have their lives. Why should I care? If they're taken care of, that's all I need to do.
The way that she lives her life is so cool, and she's just such a strong character that, like, when Ebba is just having her me day and she's having like this moment where she needs validation, right? She needs some validation. She needs to know that the choices that she's made in her life that have brought her here to this moment, that she's fulfilled, that she made the right choices, right? Because she sees Charlotte over here, who has a husband, who has children, who's polyamorous, and just like goes to the French Alps to bang a bunch of dudes. And that's fine, right? Like, and she's cool with that. Her husband and all that, it's consensual. It's cool. It's fine. She's like, why? Like, also, I don't need to tell that why. It's fine. Like, I live my life how I want. I make myself happy. That's my whole thing. And Ebba in this moment is kind of like asking her about how that works in that relationship. And Charlotte, who does not have to do any of this work, right? It's just kind of like, I mean, it just does. Like, this is just my life and it's great and I love it. There's other people that are important in my life, like, not just my kids and my husband. Like, what do you think? And Ebba is trying to be like, yeah, but you're not fulfilled, right? Your life is a little bit less meaningful than mine, right? Like, in the way that she's like accosting her with these questions. And Charlotte, who thought she was kind of like educating or demystifying like her way of life a little bit for her, is like clearly the most emotionally aware person in this whole thing. And it's just like, you know what? This is inappropriate. We are not going to do this anymore. We can hang out and let's change the subject, but what's happening right now is not okay.
In the movie, does she say she's like polyamorous explicitly? Because I think
she does.
I don't think she's like going on like romantic liaisons. I think she's really just like, I'm on vacation and I'm gonna fuck who I want, and like maybe I'll know them. Who knows? Who cares? So I think it's more of like an open situation with her. I mean, granted, it's not like explicit, but the vibe is very much like, I'm not here to find love. I'm here to fuck and ski, and then I'm gonna go home. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I did ascribe that to that, and that's a little bit, that was incorrect of me. So
well, it's totally possible, but like,
you're correct.
She seems so dismissive of men. Like, I need you for sex, and then when I'm done, I'm gonna go have a drink, and you're gonna leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
Her character is so just like, she's so fucking cool. She's, like you said from the beginning, she's the only one who's living outside of this expectation. She does not care how she's judged or seen. She recognizes herself autonomously as an individual person and seeks out for herself in the short life the happiness she deserves. I think that that's incredible, because ultimately the way she breaks it down too is like, my kids, obviously they're cared for. I make sure when I go on this trip, they're fine. My husband, similarly, he's with them probably, and I get to do this. And he gets to go on his trips too. And I hope he has an amazing time and meets amazing people. We'll make sure that these kids get raised. And why am I going to sacrifice my life for this? Like, I should still be able to live. And also, I'm not defined by these other people. Of course, they're a part of my life. Of course, they matter. But I'm not going to sacrifice my own personal identity for any of these particular expectations, especially as a woman, right? There's an expectation of her to exist and kind of disappear under the costume of motherhood. Like, in that case, oftentimes she no longer exists. She's just a mom. That's it. And she loses her identity in that way. And Charlotte's like, fuck that. Never. Why would I ever do that? Absolutely not.
She's a mom or she's a wife. Those are her two things. And we don't know anything about Ebba outside of those two roles that she inhabits.
And the way she pushes back on that too, because she inhabits that role and she knows that those are the two big things in her life. And when she's seeing somebody who rebukes that and says, that's not for me and I can do both, she's like, no, but that means that you're less than me because I'm willing to sacrifice my identity for this. And she's like, why? Like, literally, why? Because society told you to do that? Unfortunately, yeah, they do. But you can make the choice to get out of it. And I think it's this, like, I mean, for Ebba, it's this reckoning of performance, of a front where, like, she obviously desires more. She wants, I mean, first and foremost, she wants a partner who, like, it doesn't make her feel like shit. Like,
right.
Actively gaslights her. And so in all of this, there is that, like, it's sort of a glimmer of what if that she's starting to see under this guise of, like, pain. And it's pain of lashing out again, where it's like, no, but, like, we're a unit and we're this and we're that. And it's like, yeah, that's cool, but I'm not. She's like, well, no, that's not a choice. That wasn't a choice. Like, you know what I mean? It's this moment of, like, pain and she's lashing out and you just see her realize that, like, fuck, it is a choice to some degree still. And she's right. But, like, because, again, not to say that one thing is better than the other, because I think that they're both equally valid things. But Ebba, it's very clear that she thought there was no choice.
Right. And it's really interesting, too, because in the same way that her husband is a prisoner of toxic masculinity, she is, like, we see her inhabit this kind of toxic behavior where she is, like, so hell-bent on seeing herself as this kind of, like, righteous matriarch that gives up her life for this and needs, she, in the same way that her husband needs to be seen as a man, she needs to be seen as a sacrificial mother who's doing the right thing. And we see not only the harm that toxic masculinity causes and patriarchy causes. It's amazing. It's really interesting because going back to what you were saying about, like, you know, that moment where she pulls the bar down and unintentionally knocks somebody's head and they're like, hey, what? She's doing that, like, head on here in this scene. And you see that, like, no, like, you made choices. These are choices. You can choose something different tomorrow. And what does she do in the end? The husband is still the husband, and he is still the shining beacon of the family, and nothing fucking changes.
Nothing changes. And I do think you bringing up the fact that Charlotte stays on the bus, obviously the bus is unsafe. Obviously she's looking out for her kids because there's a possibility that this bus could fall off this cliff. But in that moment, she makes a choice to be the mother, to be that person. When everything in her wants to just do whatever, she's like, no, we have to get off the bus. I'm panicking. I can't hurt my kids. And so seeing that sort of spring into action and that sort of catalyst for everyone else who's like, yeah, fuck this. We have families too and blah, blah, blah. It is the instinctual and sort of, like, passive decision of complacency. Obviously it's, like, a different dynamic because of the danger aspect, but there is a level of, like, that, like, no, I have to do this. Like, we just have to, like, do this and we have to just get off, and, like, that's what we're doing.
But
and everyone follows suit.
You see these people that, like, have long sleeve shirts on that are not equipped for the snow and the extreme cold and everything because they were in this bus and they didn't think to grab any of their luggage when they left, which, sure, they might have died going down on that bus, right? But they might die. They might very well die a slow, painful death and have to watch everybody around them die as they walk down the mountain. Like, because they're walking down a fucking mountain with just long sleeve shirts, a snowy ass mountain.
And that's such an
They might get hit by a car, like on its way up or down.
Yeah, it's the most interesting way to end this, because truly, at the end of the day, both are dangerous and both are scary and both are unknown, right? There's this unknown aspect of like, what if we die in the bus? What if we die outside? Like that is just like a general metaphor for life. Like, what if you could die tomorrow? Nothing matters. Nothing is real. But what is real are the choices you make and the recognition of how that affects other people, and the recognition that you exist as an individual, autonomous person, assuming and obviously outside of the context of sort of like hierarchical privileges and systemic privileges and all of that stuff, because that's a whole different conversation. If we're looking base level here, these characters are all within the same means and the same privilege level. This recognition of choice is so interesting, because both are like, one is leaning into the expectation of gender normativity and heteronormativity, and the other is like, no, I'm not going to fucking do that.
Right.
It's perfect. Jess, it's so good.
This film is perfect. Like, I can't find
really
anything.
Good.
I think the only thing that I didn't like was the spot for the toilet in the room where when
it's right behind
in the bathroom. Yeah, it's right behind. And
yeah.
Like, that was weird. But I think that's it. Like, because this movie I think was really perfect, and like, even like, it's also the type of movie that I could watch it 3 more times and get something different out of it every single time. You could write a dissertation on this movie, because it's not only well written, it's well crafted, it's poignant, it's saying so many things about cyclical behavior and about masculinity and like gender norms, and it is fucking incredible. It is so perfect.
Yeah.
Please go watch this movie, everybody. Holy shit, what a treat.
It's really good. I want to bring up one more character real quick, just briefly. The janitor, as this like onlooker, sort of voyeur of this, because he sort of, his character gives off the impression that like this is such a common thing. Like, this performance and this dismantling of relationships and this acknowledgement is such a common thing in this space, to the point where like they're crying and they're like, oh, we have a get, like, he can't watch us, and he's just like so unenthused, like could not have been less interested. Like, do you think this is original? Do you think I'm like, wow, what's gonna happen next? I've seen this. What do you need?
Yeah.
And I think that that's like a really interesting way to sort of illustrate the idea that like, yeah, none of this is unique. Nobody's unique. This whole like, in their minds, these characters, this is the most devastating, the most like cataclysmic weekend. But in the grand scheme of things, it is the most inconsequential nothingness and the most boring, ununique thing to happen because of that character. That's what this character is doing. And I think it's so cool. And that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, 100%.
He's great. Billy, Pete, and their 2 children are vacationing in the French Alps, enjoying some skiing and the much-needed time away from real life. Unfortunately, things quickly take a turn for the worse when an avalanche crashes into the outdoor restaurant while they are waiting to order food. During the commotion, Billy stays with her children to try and protect them, while Pete grabs his cell phone and runs away without considering his family's safety. Luckily, the restaurant was only covered in avalanche smoke, quote unquote, and everyone is okay. Though the moment passed quickly, the terrifying experience looms over the family's vacation for the rest of the trip as Billy and Pete find themselves at an impasse, with Billy insisting Pete left her and their children to save himself, and Pete adamant that he did not leave them.
The friction between Pete and Billy becomes more prominent as Billy continually brings the event up in social situations, recounting the events, searching for someone to validate her experience, while Pete continues to deny the truth of the events even after his own children corroborate their mother's story. Billy and Pete take time away from each other and their children to clear their heads. Billy takes private ski lessons from Guglielmo and gets a boost of self-esteem. Meanwhile, Tomas goes skiing with his friend Zach, gives himself a concussion, gets drunk, and tries to prove his manhood at a real sausage fest. Eventually, Pete confesses and breaks down hard. Then, while skiing the next day, Billy pretends to be in a bad situation so Pete can save her and redeem himself in their children's eyes. In the end, nothing has changed and everything stays the same.
first and foremost, I do want to, off the bat, acknowledge my love, admiration, and respect for Julia Louis-Dreyfus's full-fledged face acting in this film. I think it is award-worthy. I think it's impeccable. I think she carries this movie. Without her, this movie doesn't exist. Yeah, flawless performance by her. I think she's amazing. Story-wise, biggest issue, the reframing of her want and her problem in this story is framed as like a nuisance to how we're now viewing it, which is through the lens of like the man, the dad, the male character. This is suddenly a story about like longing and what if my life was different and what if I changed things, which is like, that's not what this movie's about. It tries to humanize him in a way where we feel less bad that he runs away, which kind of pulls focus from the intent of what this story is supposed to do, which is more of a character study about masculinity. And by doing that, they are sort of giving allowances to the idea of being that toxic man and saying like, well, no, it's like, okay, because she's kind of a screechy woman, right? Like she's kind of a bad person.
She's kind of a complainer, right? Like she's a lawyer and she was going to sue them for the avalanche that happened, which then her husband's like, oh my gosh, wait, there were signs posted. And I was like, fuck you.
So and that's the thing is they make her, because by softening him and heightening her, they make us in a misogynist in a patriarchal society. There's already a hatred for women, base level. People hate women. Misogyny reigns supreme. So by making her this character, you're perpetuating that idea that like, oh, well, she's also a problem too because she's loud and obnoxious and kind of an asshole to her husband. When in fact, no, this husband is the most cowardice, like bad partner, selfish, entitled piece of shit. He's a bad dad. He's a bad partner. He's so not supportive. And that lack of any sort of opinion, that lack of any sort of resilience, he then sees as like, well, I'm the victim. I'm the one who's like, whatever. And that's not necessarily an interesting study because that is just, it just is. Like it takes this gross misogynistic turn, and I think that's the worst part of this, is that it's reframed in such a narrow-minded and American way, and it just reeks. It's
not a commentary on gender norms or masculinity or anything like it was in the first one. And again, they took out 30 fucking minutes of screen time for it really could have used that extra 30 minutes. But yeah, they just made her kind of the bad guy, which like was really apparent in scenes like the helicopter scene where, okay, so Pete, this whole time, his dad died. And so he's feeling like, my dad never went anywhere and did anything. I should go places and do stuff. And we see him do nothing but think about himself. Instead of staying at the family-friendly resort that his kids would have loved, they stayed at the posh, like, singles club. And there's just all these moments where, like, all he does is think of himself. And it's, like, absolutely apparent. But, like, the helicopter scene, he's going to take his family skiing from a helicopter, and he paid like $2,000 for this, right? And they wake up late because he was on his phone all night looking at Zach's photos, his work friend, and he's just like, oh my gosh, what if I was Zach? Oh my gosh, like, this is the life that I want. And he was doing exactly what his dad did, which his dad was a travel agent for 30 years that never left his city, basically.
Yeah.
So he was like, so he's doing that same thing. So by being on his phone all night, this alarm didn't go off, right? And so they're already late for this thing. They want breakfast, but dad's like, no, we gotta go. They go. They can't find the mitten or the glove. And then dad's like, no, we have to go. And then there's like a whole conversation. But it's framed as if this is an issue only because of Billy, only because she wants food and she can't find the glove and she can't do any of this. And dad just wants to, like, they probably, like, he's not thinking about his family. He's like, they probably have a glove on the helicopter. What the fuck are you talking about? There's no glove on the helicopter. There's nothing there. Like, he does not care about his family. He just wants to be untethered. And it is so apparent. And yeah, in that scene, she's the bad guy. She's the one that we're like, man, she sucks. And then it's like, oh, look, the glove was under the car the whole time. If only somebody would have actually looked, right? And so it's also like vilifying the kids in that way too, being like his wife and his children are holding him back from having this kind of life and they're awful to him, which was so boring, and I really didn't like it. And then at the very end, it comes out that the kids fucking hate skiing. He never even asked anybody what they wanted. He just decided, like, okay, cool, we're going skiing because my dad said every day is all you have. And I'm like, okay, but what about everybody else? So when he takes the phone, you know that that's what he's going to do in that avalanche, right? You absolutely know. He doesn't have any relationship with the kids. Like, all of the nuance that was in the first film is completely gone from this one because it felt like they dumbed it down for an American audience where they had to explicitly show that he took the phone when he left. They had to explicitly show like everything that they wanted you to know because otherwise we wouldn't get it.
And they also had to explicitly make this a male-centered story of like longing and hopes and like, well, my dad wasn't there for me, and like, that's not the point of this. Like, even with that perspective, when we're trying to like, wow, they're kind of holding him back, like he whatever, and like, oh, it's such an intense, like, wow, like what a no-win situation. I'm like, no, he's the bad guy. Like, he's a bad person. He's a bad, selfish man. Like, he's never considered his family once in his life, and now it's like the first time he's actually trying to, and it's really just him trying to, I don't know, like, is this like a grief trip? Is he trying to grieve the loss of his father in a way that is like, I'm going to live for today because this was this motto that this guy said, but at the expense of his family, like putting them in danger, doing things that like they don't want to do. When they finally go to the kid's place, they go down that like track and he's like bumping his son, and the son's like, I don't want to go that fast. He's like, oh, come on, be a man. Don't be like a little baby. Like, let's go. And it's like just disgusting. It's not cute. It's not funny. It's like, what an asshole. What a dumb asshole. And the way
and he also recenters the conversation on himself every fucking time.
Every time.
They're talking about something completely different, and he is just such an awful manipulator, gross person that thinks the entire world revolves around him. So he will just interrupt a conversation and fucking derail it, like when they are having dinner with Charlotte, right? And then
I just literally every time he does it though, her face, Julia Louis-Dreyfus's face, like he'll just do something. She's like, what? Like it's the most, like she is aghast every time. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it's always like, what? Who are you? What are you doing?
But she doesn't say it. She doesn't say anything to him. So in that way, she's also allowing him to continue that behavior and like enabling that because she's just like, she never actually says what she wants to say to fucking anybody, except for Guglielmo when she says, I would fuck you right through that wall if I wanted to. Like, make no mistake. That's the only time that she does.
I wish that she was a little bit more forth. I mean, granted, I do think that she's like in kind of an impossible situation a little bit where like she's having to deal with 3 children, like 2 of which actually like her and listen to her, and she listens too. The other one is this grown ass adult who she's trying to like tiptoe around the notion that like he's probably grieving, this is a new thing, so she's trying to be a good partner, but she's also expecting like, you need to show up for me too. And when that isn't met, like in that first conversation when they're having dinner, Charlotte and this other guy are looking away and she looks to him and mouths the word, let's go, like let's leave. And he's like yeah, and he like nods and then immediately starts into like a long conversation, and she's like, what? Like, what are you doing? And it's the most like, to me, that kind of thing is the most, I'm going to say this word, it might sound severe. It's the most repugnant behavior of a partner. Like this blatant disrespect, this blatant belittling and blatant complete disregard, like a complete lack of consideration for this person that feels like I would never, like with Eric, like, oh my God, if I did that, whoa, I like, if that ever happened to me as a partner, I'd be like, okay, I guess I'm not here. Like, great. Like, I guess I don't exist. Like, I need a partner who can like be supportive. Like, These people literally, like, and here's the situation too. In this situation, these people are strangers. They mean nothing. This one person you met 2 seconds ago, the other person you met yesterday, they are strangers. I'm asking, like, hey, this is our vacation. Can we just go? And it made me so mad. Like, I was so uncomfortably mad when he's like, yeah. Story. I'm like, what a fucking dick.
And I hate that this is like, because this family is kind of portrayed as the every American family. Like, this is just how it is. And this is just how the family works. And this is how like saying that this is the norm without critiquing it or without having anything interesting to say about it. Because I see this and it's fucking awful and it's fucking gross. And I don't love when they paint like these, when they're just doing the smallest amount of character work and of consideration when building these like family units that are supposed to, like, I mean, look, it sucks to be a kid in that situation. It fucking sucks. And it fucking sucks to like not be thought about and to be going a little bit slower because you're afraid that you're going to die, you know, and to not have anybody around you care about that kind of stuff. But it's played for laughs here, and that's supposed to be funny. And so for me, that was the hardest thing about watching this was I hate that the American family, in terms of like this representation, and a lot of representations in Hollywood, are just kind of there to be bullies. And there's just so much bullying that it doesn't allow for growth. It's just really boring and tired, and I hate it.
Same. It's the reiterative toxic humor aspect of like, well, everything sucks and like, oh, whatever. Let's like the casual meanness to each other. It's one of the things that Eric and I have talked about, like specifically when we see like gay characters too, like Modern Family. We mentioned Cam as a couple. It's like, sure, but also they're like mean to each other 80% of the time.
Why
like,
are they fucking mean to each other?
I know. It's like constant
any-
belittling and put down and put down and put down. And then like, I love you too, but you're kind of fat and you're kind of a bitch. Do you guys like each other? Are you friends? That's like kind of important. Do you actually like each other? Because then if not, why are you together? You can leave. Like anybody can leave at any time. There shouldn't be a reason for like a breakup. The reason for a breakup could be like it just isn't working anymore. No one's at fault, but like we've grown apart or we just things are different now. That should be reason enough. So in a lot of these like things were like, well, I'm stuck with him. I mean, not really. Like
no,
truly,
you have a
like
choice.
going back to
everything is a choice.
Everything is a choice. And so that's why I'm like going back to this story where I'm like, Will Ferrell or this character, if you're really that unhappy and you feel like you're being held back, leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to be like ditch your family, but like if you are willing to put your family in danger for the sake of it, the safest choice is to then just leave and go do it yourself and deal with the repercussions of, you know, managing a divorce and like finding time to be with your kids and like raise them or like have that conversation with your partner. You have kids, it's a different story, but if you're going to make that choice, make the safer option, which is just get a divorce. Like just break up. Like it's really not that hard and it's going to suck, but like you're not happy and you don't like her. You treat her like shit. You treat her like she's nobody. You don't consider her. She's not a considered part of your life. You should bounce then. Like,
but then he knows
right?
that he can't do any better, right? Because nobody wants him because he's just an old sad man.
Yeah.
And it also bothers me, like, because Rosie is also written really badly, the girlfriend of Zach, where she is adventurous and she's out, but like she seems overbearing just because she's adventurous, right? And Zach is like somebody that's like just a little sheep. He doesn't really have a personality. He just kind of like will follow whoever is around at the time, right? And so it's Rosie, and Rosie's like, and he's like, oh, cool. Like, we're going to go. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but like, cool. You're going to go explore the world. I'll go explore the world. That sounds really fun. Yeah, let's do that. We don't have any plans. Cool. Let's do that. But it's all like, oh my God, hashtags are so bad. Oh my God, hashtags. And you're like, okay, fine. And then like when they're on the lift, like Rosie is having this conversation with Jamie with Billy.
I love this. I love this scene. This scene is genuinely really funny to me.
Because like Rosie is like, look, you don't have anything to apologize for the other night. What he did was fucked up. You have a right to be angry, right? Which absolutely, yes. But then it is like turned into everything is black and white. wait,
Well,
what? Everything is this and everything is this. And it's like, how old are you? 30? And I'm like, okay, like, so her sincerity and her words aren't supposed to be taken. Like, and I know that this is supposed to be a comedy, but I feel like that her character as a whole, trying to be that Fanny character, that support, was just completely lost and horribly written.
But that's also the thing is like the punchline being like, wait, how old are you? 30? Oh, well, you just don't get it then. When in my head, I'm like, hey, Queen, you're the one with the shitty husband and a really bad position. So it has nothing to do with age. Like, I mean, I think her delivery of like, yeah, if he ever did that to me, I'd fucking kick him in the balls and run away. And it's like, yeah, well, it's not that black and white. It's like, no, in this situation it is. If he ever did that, fuck him, I'm out. And she's like, well, it's not. No, it's black and white.
But it's played like Rosie is the one that's in the wrong, right? When she's absolutely in the right. She's 100% in the right.
But that's why I love it, because it's like so earnest, and the way that they pit back and forth of the like, no, it's pretty easy. Like, no, it's actually really good. Like, no, it's like very simple. Like that pitter patter is great. I mean, granted, the punch of like the joke at the end, I think it's silly because it also doesn't play into what is actually happening. We're like, well, you just don't know my family, but it's like, Queen, do you know your family? Like, you're the one in the position of all of this strife. Like, you're the one. She's telling you something very earnest and very real. And I mean, you should listen to her. Like,
and to me, the way that was written, or the way that it landed, was like, oh, don't take her seriously. You still like, because this is ultimately a story about Pete and his redemption. Right. And so like the way that it is written is Rosie is wrong. Rosie doesn't know what she's talking about. She's way too young, and you just need to stay, and you just need to do this. And you need, like, it reinforces that staying with Pete is the right decision because she's young and she doesn't know anything, that was also so funny to me because like she's 30 years old. Clearly she has her stuff together. She has been on her own since she was like, since she left her parents' house. She was 18 or whatever, but she is living her best life, doing what she wants to do. And that's great. Good for her. Just because you're like 10 years older than her and fucking hate your life doesn't mean that you need to like diminish hers. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Truly. And I think that's like, it's an interesting take just in terms of like, even though she recognizes that he sucks and the situation is so bad and she hates it, she hates her life or hates him. Like she's in a predicament. Even then, at the sort of in the same way that like Ebba has this reaction to Charlotte in the first one, where she recognizes her life is bad, but she still has that emotional like, well, what I'm doing is better because I've lived it and I'm a mother. It's like the same as in this case. She's like, well, I'm older, so I know more, and you don't know what you're talking about because I'm older. And it's that like childish, reactive, just like instantaneous. What is the word? It's like
I get what you're saying.
Defense.
But I think
it's a defensiveness that she has for her family, even though there's a recognition of it. The writing, I 100% agree with you. It doesn't work in this. Like, I like her character and I like that pitter patter. I do think it's funny, but it just doesn't play into what the movie's trying to say itself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I just, it felt like just you were supposed to laugh at the wrong person in this instance, or like at least in the original, when you're talking to Charlotte, like, that she has the power, that she's like, she knows who she is and what she wants. And in this one, Rosie is kind of, the way that she is perceived by all the other characters is she doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know what she wants. What does she know? She doesn't know anything, is kind of how that character is played. So I don't think that conversation works as well. Speaking of Charlotte, though, the actor is very fun because mostly I know them from Sabrina.
Oh, yeah.
She plays Aunt Zelda, and she's like such a bitch in that role. It's fun. But like her outfit's incredible. Her vibe was great. Like, I was just talking about your dick. Like, she like literally tells that to the dude, and I was like, great.
Oh my God.
Incredible.
Well, the line at the dinner when it's like, oh, he shows up and it's like, oh, what were you saying? And they're like, oh, she was just saying like she likes you. She thinks you're like really cool and like whatever. And then she just turns to him. She's like, I was saying that I can catch a dick whenever I like. And they're like, oh, and it's just she ends up like pawning it off as like, I'm kidding. Ha ha ha. But the line to catch a dick whenever I like, it's just so like obsessed.
Yeah.
I think this version of this character, I like her considerably less because she's played as a caricature.
Yes.
She's played as not real. She's played as like, they're equating like sluttiness with like weakness and like stupidity in a way that feels misogynistic. Like in this one, whereas the first one, it's very clear that like, no, she's like, I'm going to sleep with whoever I want. I am in control, and that has nothing to do with anybody but me and my choice. And it's so well written, and it's so well like, it's so well described and so well represented. Whereas in this one, it's just like, I'm a slut, I'm going to do whatever. Does my husband know?
This one was
I don't care.
definitely
And you're like,
written
what?
by a straight monogamous person.
Yes. It's very, ugh.
The conversation that they have does not work at all, because they do have that conversation for a second when they're going up the lift where she is like, let's talk about sex right here, right? And Jamie does the, oh my God, like her great eye work again. But then basically all she says is, I do what I want. I fucking masturbate. Oh my gosh, our special parts touch. Look at our hands are touching now. Like, do I need to tell my husband about this? But like, it feels like such an unnuanced take on that character. Like you're saying, it's very much a caricature that is like, that works to just like kind of dehumanizes it a bit, or not dehumanize, it's the wrong word.
It works to diminish what the character is intending to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, the allegory of, well, our hands touch. Should we tell our husbands that our hands touch? You know that is like, you know that is not the correct argument. You know that that's a conflation of the two. Like, it's not the same. There's a difference between sexual intimacy and a handshake. You know this. We all know this. I don't know why this character, who is so open about this, is using this specific metaphor to try to relay this information. It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't feel real, because it's not a good argument, and it's not a good way to show that. It feels a little bit like manipulative, like, oh, what? Like the performance of like, are you going to go tell your husband that we touched? Like, what is this weird, like...
What is this about? What are you saying?
Yeah, it honestly feels like this childish slut-shamey way. Like, it feels inauthentic.
Yeah.
Again, caricature-ish.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of how everybody feels in this. They feel so much less fleshed out. They don't feel real. They don't feel, the situation doesn't feel real. This whole world just feels like, it just feels bad.
It feels bad. I will say a couple of the things that I did like that are additions to this. The overcompensation fatherhood scene, where the next time we see him, he like makes a big stink about the guy who's going to crush the kid in that shelving system. Like, he's like, he makes this big thing like, he was going to crush him. I'm watching out for his safety. I think that is like a really good scene to add to this as a way for the character to like we're seeing an overcompensation performance. Like, we're seeing him now trying to perform father and protector and nurturer in this super inauthentic way. And we see Billy like kind of looking at him like, what are you doing? Like, what is this about? Like, what? And he's like, he was going to smash him. And then she looks over like, is it? And he's like, I don't know. And she's like, oh, okay. Like, sure, I guess. Like, I think it's...
Oh, you were there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's such like it's such a cool, to me, I think it's a really great addition. Granted, it doesn't work because the movie is a little wonky, especially by comparison to the first one or to the original. But I do think that it's a really interesting take on like that performance in such a like overt way. I liked it. I like that scene at least.
Yeah. I mean, the addition of that scene was good, but everything else I think was just awful and bad in this movie. And I want to talk about the end, because I really hated that Billy decided that she was going to call for her husband to come and carry her down the mountain so that way like he could be redeemed in the kid's eyes. And she's like, I'm going to do this for you, which she doesn't fucking have to. She says something like, but like, you need to change how I look at you. But what she's doing in that moment is just perpetuating, like, she's she's like lying to her children. She's gaslighting her kids with her husband for this false narrative of like, I mean, their dad's not a good guy. Why would you try to make them think their dad is a good guy when he's not? Like, you're just doing this for his ego, and that's at the detriment of your children. Like, this helps nobody.
Yes. Break up. Like, just break up. Honestly, break up. Like, I don't know why you're like, redeem him in the eyes of the kids. No. Why are you trying to convince them that he's good? Again, he's not good. And he keeps proving time and time again, he does not mean well, and he does not intend to change. We've seen that. We were clear in establishing that. Why are you giving him this chance in this like faux heroic sort of like tete-a-tete of earnesty and vulnerability where she's like, you need to change how I see you too, and you need to change. Like, we don't need that. We've already established that he needs to change from fucking day one. This isn't an interesting enough study for this thing to make any sense. Break up. Literally go home and break up. I'm so sorry, but like, you hate each other. You will never see this man in a positive light again because, rightfully so, he's not a good guy. He is never going to see her as a person. He's never going to see her as a partner. I don't think that there's any way past this, especially after this trip. It's an impasse, a complete, total blockade of any sort of growth. So this weird performance feels real nasty, and we need to break up. We need to break up.
Just like we need to break up with this film.
Yes. Well, the last thing I do want to say, I do love that instead of getting a video of it, she's like, hey kids, can you come out here and tell me exactly what happened with your dad?
Yeah.
It was so rough. I was like, fuck. Like, instead of the video, it's like, hey kids, let's recite exactly what happened the other day. So what did your dad do?
Yeah, you need to tell your daddy what you think of him. And it's like, oh.
It was, I mean, granted, that also, like, in a realistic way, toxic. Babe, that is so gross. Do not bring the kids into this. That is nasty. That is manipulative.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, it's trauma.
It was really
it's abuse.
bad. It was an awful
It's emotional.
choice.
It's emotional abuse. Like, do not put them in the middle of this. This has nothing to do with them. Put them in the room, shut the door. Fuck you for bringing them out. For the sake of comedy, however, whoa. Because that is the crossing of the line for me, where it's just like, oh my God, you're bad. Put him away. What are you doing? Like, this is so bad.
Get out of here.
Go away. Yeah. Anyways, comedically, especially for this like silly land of bad people, that's wild and funny. Realistically, whoa. Crossing a line, queen. Like, that's terrible. You're being terrible.
Why? Yeah. Why would you do that?
Why would you do that? Exactly. But apart from that, I'm honestly good.
I don't have anything to say. I'm good too.
That's GTFO. So for everybody at home, that means get the fuck out.
So we're back from our skication.
We made it.
And we're here. So Eric.
Hello.
What did you think of Force Majeure? Is that how you say it?
I think it's Force Majeure.
Majeure. Okay. Whoops.
I think so.
What honestly, an American. Oh my God.
I think it is, but again,
Force
please do not.
Majeure. Who was this for?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's for, I'm going to be very sincere here. I think it's for men and for masculine people as a point of discussion for exactly, like, it is the perfect perspective for that because it so eloquently demonstrates and highlights the fragility of masculinity and the performance of masculinity in such a negative way, in the way that it shows how it impacts everyone around you and makes you blind to your own action. Like, amazing. I think men and masculine people should watch this movie because it really, like, it's really good. And it'll show you, like what a real, like, tense, it's just good. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I can argue with that. Because, like, really, it paints masculinity as this cult that like all it does is just harm everybody around it. And like it's this cult that men play into even when they know that they're wrong, and they shelter others even though they know that they're wrong. So I think it's a really interesting piece because of all that. I will also say it is for the king beyond the wall. It's for the guy that played Mats. I don't even want to butcher that, but he's great, and I like him a lot. And
he was great.
He was very good in this role. And I feel like I've seen Fanny in something else that I really liked her in too, but I thought she was also great.
Yeah,
this movie was great.
It was well written, well acted, well shot. It is such a like. I saw Downhill first. I could not believe. It's not. I could not believe. I can believe it, but like, I was so pleasantly surprised by how good this movie was. I thought it was going to be good, hopefully, because that's what I'd heard at least. But it was masterful. Like, it is a fantastic film.
So you like it then?
I do like it. Yeah, I think it's excellent. Again, pleasantly surprised. I'm so pleased that we got to watch it this week. Do you like it?
Yeah, I feel the same way. This was a great recommendation, and this was just a real treat to watch. Where we watched some nostalgic stuff, we watched some stinkers, we watched some. This was an absolute treat to watch, and I think that everybody should watch this, and I think you will all have a lovely time with it.
Yeah, agreed.
What about 2020's Downhill? Was this new, interesting, the same, progressive, or regressive?
I think it wasn't new or interesting or the same. I think it was like, it took a very intentional, very interesting critique of masculinity and kind of threw it out the window, and then wrapped it with a bow and a little joke. Like it didn't feel earnest. It didn't feel real. I think it was like pretty regressive just in the way that it like leaned back onto misogyny and the tropes of like misunderstood men and shrieking women and like these nasty, just toxic tropes, and it leaned on them for the sake of humor, and oftentimes that humor kind of just fell flat. So like, it was regressive in pretty much every aspect. It didn't do what it intended to do, at least what I felt like it intended to do. And it's a bit of a little slap in the face for like an American audience. I feel like the first one was so good and such a dissection of like these intense themes, and it's like the American one's like, oh no, I'm fucking a ski instructor. Like, okay, I don't care. Like, I'm bored. I mean, to that effect, when I first saw it in theaters, and even this time, I still enjoy it. Oh, well, here. What did you think? Was it new, interesting, or the same? Was it progressive or regressive? How do you feel about it?
I think it was none of those. I think the skeleton of the story, the beats, were very the same. I mean, our intros were almost word for word the exact same thing, right? Because the story is essentially the same, but in taking out the extra 30 minutes, in dumbing down the characters, and really just throwing out the entire theme of the original film, it just felt like the dollar store version of like something from a luxury brand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was just so regressive. Everything that I liked about the first one was completely gone. All of the cool character work, everything that it had to say, the characterization, I mean, when it's made into an American remake, it has to, show the man as like, we have to see the film through the eyes of the man, right? He has to get his redemption at the end, right? Like, we can't have him not get his redemption. It's just so apparent that this was made for an American audience, and I think not only was this a slap in the face to American society, but I think it was also a slap in the face to the original film and everybody that worked on that. I would be so pissed if somebody was going to not even to do a like inspired by movie where like, we're going to take some of the same things, but we're going to turn it into something else. Like, this is the exact same movie, but like just a different genre with nothing to say. And it's just so regressive.
Yeah.
Who is it for?
Americans. It's for an American audience. It's for an audience largely and generally who is unwilling to think critically and analyzing the power structures that be, specifically American men.
Yes.
That's quite literally who it's for. I think that's who it's marketed for too. I mean, Will Ferrell is the lead, like American men. Who do you think it was for?
Yeah, I also think it was for American men. I mean, it's their story, and maybe that's why we didn't like it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry, did you like it?
I mean, okay, so here's the twist. I still like it.
Oh.
I have a lot of issues with it, and I think it is regressive. I think it is all of these things. I think, especially by comparison to the first one, it fails at every turn. Did I still enjoy it? Absolutely. Did I still enjoy it the second time? Absolutely. Did I still enjoy it watching it immediately after the first one? Yeah.
Ooh.
Which is strange because to me, I remember seeing it in theaters and being like, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I mean, granted, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is amazing, but the story itself, I was like, oh, that was an interesting story. Like, wow, cool. I would love to see the original. And I still enjoyed it. I still, like, it's toxic and messy and generally bad for all of the reasons we've discussed. But at the end of the day, I cannot, in good faith, say that I did not enjoy it at every time I've watched it. I still enjoy it.
Interesting.
I know. Did you like it?
I absolutely did not like it.
Yeah.
I would not recommend this movie to anybody.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
I would recommend it for Julia Louis-Dreyfus alone, especially if you like her character in Veep. Like, if you're a fan of that style, I feel like give it a shot, because like you would probably really enjoy her character in this. Again, toxic mess. However,
I mean, sure, you can totally like that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. We did it. Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate you. We appreciate the suggestions. Keep them coming. We really love when we get these. It's
what a
such
treat. I mean, this is also something that I've been wanting to do. So like, fantastic. I'm so happy I got to watch that first one. What a damn delight.
Don't forget to rate and review us on wherever you get your pods. Wow, I can talk. And follow us on social media. We have a letterbox that we have been updating, and we are posting little reviews of what we do there, and upcoming episodes too, so you'll be able to see that. And we are also super active on Instagram now. Oh my gosh, look at us. We do polls for upcoming episodes, ask for your thoughts and opinions on some movies, and it's pretty cool. We're actually doing it now. Wow, look at us. 2022, here we are. Our artwork and music is by Eric Lefebvre. Our editing is by Danny Barkley. And thank you again for listening. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jazz.
And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. This podcast has been brought to you by the NOTstalgia Network.
Visit thenotStalgiaNetwork.com for more.
Hey everybody, I'm Eric.
I'm Shelby.
I'm Jake.
And we are the band Lousy Advice from the Lousy Advice Podcast.
Come listen as we draft artist and genre-centric best of lists.
With the help of our closest friends.
These lists are canon.
And there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it.
From Misfits to Cher.
Green Day to Gaga.
Or Pup to Paramore.
Listen to the Lousy Advice Podcast now, or else.
Stream us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the NOTstalgia Network, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget that we are the band Lousy Advice, and this is our podcast, the Lousy Advice Podcast.
The Lousy Advice Podcast?
The Lousy Advice Podcast. Podcast.